That makes 100. A woman whispered beneath the blaze of the Bath Assembly Room's chandeliers, and the words travelled faster than the music. By the time Valentine Northcote, Duke of Kesterbridge, crossed the threshold of the ballroom on Friday, the 5th of September 1817, every mother with an unmarried daughter seemed to know the tally. 100 introductions declined across 3 seasons. 100 carefully dressed hopes dismissed with perfect courtesy. 100 women who had discovered that the most sought-after bachelor in England could bow, smile, and refuse without giving society a single rude sentence to repeat. The orchestra faltered for half a beat as heads turned toward him. Silk rustled. Fans lifted. Conversation softened into expectation. Only one woman did not look. Miss Eugenia Tresham stood near the open doors that led toward the carriage lobby, her attention fixed not upon the Duke, but upon an elderly Viscountess whose gloved hand trembled around a small brass counter. Eugenia had noticed the mistake before anyone else, because she had spent much of her life noticing what other people considered too ordinary to matter. The counter in Lady Morland's hand bore the number 83. Her carriage token should have borne 38. The page beside her was already calling for a hired coach. "My lady," Eugenia said, moving quietly through the guests before the wrong number could be carried outside. "May I see that counter?" Lady Morland blinked at her. "This one? The boy gave it to me." Eugenia accepted it carefully. The brass disc was cool against her fingers. The number 83 had been stamped near the edge, and a crescent-shaped file mark crossed the rim. She had seen that mark before, though the memory came too quickly to name. She looked toward the page. He was young, narrow-shouldered, and suddenly pale. "Lady Morland's carriage is number 38, Eugenia said. "You called 83. "I was told it was hers, miss." "By whom?" The page glanced toward the ballroom, where the Duke's arrival had gathered every important gaze. "I don't know. One of the gentleman's servants." Eugenia did not believe him. His eyes moved too quickly, and his fingers curled against the seam of his coat. Yet Lady Morland was already anxious, and anxiety in an elderly woman should not be sharpened merely to satisfy curiosity. Eugenia reached for the tray of counters beside the caller and found number 38 beneath 2 ivory markers. "Here, my lady, this is yours." Lady Morland exhaled. "I knew my coachman would never use such a scratched thing." Eugenia looked again at the crescent cut on 83. It was not an ordinary scratch. Someone had marked the edge deliberately. "You were quite right to question it," Lady Morland said. "I might have climbed into the wrong carriage entirely. Not while I was standing here." The answer came before Eugenia could soften it. Lady Morland smiled, but Lady Ursula Rivington did not. Eugenia felt her presence before she heard her voice. "Miss Tresham." Lady Ursula's tone carried no more warmth than a closed door. "Philomena has been waiting for you." Eugenia returned counter 83 to the page. "See that it goes back to the proper livery office." "Yes, miss." The boy closed his hand around it too quickly. Eugenia turned. Lady Ursula stood in violet satin, severe and handsome, with her daughter Philomena beside her in white silk embroidered with silver. Philomena's beauty had the polished quality of something arranged for display. Her fair hair shone beneath a narrow wreath of pearls. Her expression remained sweet, though her gaze followed the brass counter as the page carried it away. Lady Morland had been given the wrong number, Eugenia explained. "Then the page should have corrected it," Lady Ursula said. "You are not employed to manage the assembly rooms." The word employed struck precisely where Lady Ursula intended. Eugenia was not a servant. She was a gentlewoman, the daughter of the late Captain Tresham, who had spent years surveying military roads and copying routes after the wars. Yet death had reduced distinctions that society once respected. Since coming into Lady Ursula's household, Eugenia had served as companion, reader, letter writer, and convenient relation who required no public gratitude. "No," Eugenia said, "I am employed to remain useful without being noticed." Philomena lowered her lashes, hiding what might have been amusement. Lady Ursula's mouth tightened. "You were meant to stand beside my daughter. His Grace has arrived." The ballroom seemed to gather around that title, His Grace. The Duke whom 100 women had failed to interest. The Duke whose refusal had become a kind of legend among those who believed marriage was a contest and rank its highest prize. Eugenia did not turn. She had seen enough powerful men to know that society often mistook stillness for depth and privilege for character. "Then Philomena has no shortage of people eager to stand beside her," Eugenia said. "That is not the point. It rarely is." Lady Ursula stepped closer. "Do not be insolent." Eugenia's hand moved toward the pocket hidden in the folds of her sober blue gown. Her fingers found the cracked brass compass that had belonged to her father. The lid no longer closed properly, but the needle still settled north. It had steadied beside route books, toll lists, and rain-stained maps, while Captain Tresham taught her that confusion became less frightening once one knew where one stood. She pressed her thumb against the familiar fracture. "I prevented Lady Morland from entering the wrong carriage," she said. "I will apologize for leaving Philomena's side. I will not apologize for that." Lady Ursula's eyes chilled. "You are in danger of forgetting how much you owe this family. I remember it every morning." Before Lady Ursula could answer, the orchestra began a country dance. The first notes sent movement through the room. Couples formed. Mothers adjusted daughters. Gentlemen glanced toward the Duke and then away, unwilling to appear curious while watching him with painful care. Eugenia looked past Lady Ursula toward the carriage lobby. The page who had held counter 83 had vanished. The tray remained, but the brass disc with the crescent mark was no longer there. A small unease settled beneath her ribs. She had been certain the mark meant something. Her father had taught her to distrust details that seemed misplaced. Wrong distances, wrong milestones, wrong numbers placed in the right hands. "Eugenia," Philomena said lightly, "you are staring at the servants. One of them has gone. Servants often do, not while on duty." Lady Ursula drew a breath sharp enough to silence both women. "Enough. You will stand where I placed you." Eugenia inclined her head, because survival within another person's house required choosing which battles could be won in public. She stepped back toward the wall, not beside Philomena, but near enough to satisfy appearances. Only then did she become aware of the silence spreading through the nearest circle of guests. It was not complete silence. The music continued, and conversation persisted near the far end of the room. Yet something had shifted. Faces turned past her. A young lady beside the refreshment table lowered her fan. Philomena straightened. Lady Ursula's expression changed with astonishing speed from displeasure to welcome. Eugenia assumed the Duke had approached them at last. She kept her gaze on the carriage doors. Somewhere beyond them, a page carried a brass counter that did not belong to Lady Morland, marked with a crescent she almost remembered. She wondered who had meant to use it and why. Across the ballroom, Valentine Northcote watched the one woman who had not looked at him. He had seen her cross the room while every other person turned his arrival into spectacle. He had seen her place herself between an elderly lady and a careless danger. He had seen Lady Ursula rebuke her for it. Most of all, he had seen the way Miss Tresham returned counter 83 to the page, then followed it with her eyes, as though the small brass disc mattered more than a duke. Valentine declined the introduction offered by the woman at his elbow. Then he stepped away from the cluster of hopeful families and began to cross the ballroom. The distance between Valentine Northcote and Eugenia Tresham was not great, yet the ballroom seemed to lengthen as he crossed it. Conversations thinned behind him. A mother in amber silk drew her daughter subtly aside, perhaps to give him a clearer path, perhaps to ensure he noticed the sacrifice. He noticed neither. His gaze remained on the woman in blue who still watched the carriage lobby, as if the disappearance of one page mattered more than 100 carefully arranged introductions. Eugenia became aware of him only when Lady Ursula's posture changed beside her. The older woman's shoulders softened. Her chin lifted. Even Philomena's practiced serenity sharpened into attention. "Your Grace," Lady Ursula said, dipping into a graceful curtsy. Eugenia turned then. Valentine stood several feet away, tall enough to command the space without appearing to demand it. His evening coat was black, his waistcoat silver-grey, and every line of him suggested restraint rather than display. He did not look bored, as the gossip columns liked to claim. He looked watchful. That unsettled Eugenia more. "Lady Rivington," he said. His voice was quiet, but the nearest guests leaned nearer all the same. He acknowledged Philomena with a bow. "Miss Rivington." Then his gaze returned to Eugenia. "I have not had the honor." Lady Ursula's hand tightened around her fan. For one instant, Eugenia saw calculation pass beneath the polished welcome. "My distant cousin and companion, Miss Eugenia Tresham," she added, the second description with deliberate care. "Miss Tresham, His Grace, the Duke of Kesterbridge." Eugenia curtsied. "Your Grace, Miss Tresham." Valentine waited until she straightened. "May I ask you a question?" "You may ask." Philomena's eyes widened slightly at the answer. Lady Ursula's lips compressed. Valentine did not appear offended. If anything, a trace of interest entered his expression. "When I entered the room, every person near you turned to look." "That sounds inconvenient." A flicker touched his mouth. "You did not." Eugenia glanced toward the carriage doors again. "Because someone else required looking after." The words landed between them with greater force than she intended. A lady nearby stopped moving her fan. Valentine's expression changed, not with surprise exactly, but with the recognition of a truth he had not expected to hear spoken plainly. "Lady Morland," he said, "you saw what happened. I saw enough to know she had the wrong carriage counter. And you knew the proper number? Lady Morland mentions number 38 whenever she worries that her coachman has forgotten her. She has made the same complaint 3 times this month." Philomena gave a soft laugh. "Eugenia remembers the oddest things." "People often call a detail odd after it has become useful," Eugenia replied. Lady Ursula stepped in before Philomena could answer. "Miss Tresham has a habit of involving herself where a servant would have managed perfectly well." Valentine looked toward the empty place beside the carriage tray. "Did he?" The question was gentle. It made Lady Ursula's rebuke sound less like authority and more like an evasion. Eugenia felt the shift around them. Society possessed an exquisite instinct for rank. A criticism that seemed reasonable from Lady Ursula could become questionable the moment a duke regarded it without agreement. "It was likely a simple mistake," Lady Ursula said. "There is no need to enlarge it." "I do not propose to enlarge it." Valentine turned slightly toward Eugenia. What number was she given? 83. Was there anything unusual about it? Eugenia hesitated. The crescent mark had stirred memory, but memory was not evidence. A filed notch on the rim, crescent-shaped. Had you seen it before? I believe so. I cannot yet say where. Lady Ursula's fan snapped shut. Surely this can wait. Miss Tresham is not an investigator. No, Valentine said. She is the person who noticed. Philomena's color altered almost imperceptibly. Eugenia saw it because she was watching her now. Not fear, not yet. Something nearer annoyance. Then the expression vanished beneath sweetness. Lady Morland is safe, is she not? That is what matters. It is one thing that matters, Valentine said. He looked toward the far side of the ballroom, where the master of ceremonies stood speaking with two gentlemen beneath the musicians' gallery. Mr. King. The call was not loud, but it carried. Master of ceremonies excused himself at once and approached with the brisk assurance of a man accustomed to managing noble tempers, misplaced partners, and late carriages without allowing any of them to disturb the dignity of the rooms. Your Grace, Lady Morland was nearly sent to the wrong coach. Can you confirm that she departed safely? Mr. King's brows drew together. I was not informed of an irregularity. You are informed now. Valentine's gaze moved to Eugenia. Miss Tresham corrected the number before the call was completed. Mr. King addressed her directly. Which number, miss? She was given 83. Her own was 38. 83 was not called this evening. His answer came without delay. Not by my list. A faint murmur passed through the guests nearest them. Lady Ursula lifted her chin. Then the page confused two counters before the formal call. Hardly a conspiracy. Eugenia turned toward her. I did not call it one. Your manner suggests otherwise. My manner suggests that the page is gone. That brought the murmur to a stop. Mr. King looked toward the carriage lobby. Gone? He left after I returned the counter to him. Mr. King signaled to an attendant. Find the boy who was stationed at the north tray. Ask whether counter 83 has been returned to the livery office. Quietly. The attendant bowed and moved away. Valentine did not watch him leave. He watched Eugenia. Why did you return it to the page? Because at the time I had no reason to hold another person's property. And now I have reason to wonder why he disappeared with it. The honesty of the answer seemed to please him, though his expression remained controlled. A sensible distinction. Lady Ursula gave a brittle smile. Miss Tresham possesses many sensible distinctions. Most of them are unnecessary at a ball. This one prevented Lady Morland from entering an unknown carriage. Valentine's tone stayed even. I would not call that unnecessary. The rebuke was restrained enough to be courteous and clear enough that no one could mistake it. Eugenia felt every listening ear turn toward Lady Ursula, then back toward her. She disliked the attention. It pressed against her skin like borrowed fabric. Yet beneath the discomfort lay something unfamiliar. He had not defended her by calling her delicate, misunderstood, or deserving of indulgence. He had named the action and allowed it to stand. Miss Tresham did nothing improper, Valentine continued. She noticed a risk and corrected it. I hope no one intends to punish her for being useful. Lady Ursula could not challenge him without appearing to endorse the danger. Of course not, Your Grace. Philomena lowered her gaze. We are all grateful Lady Morland is safe. The words were flawless. Her fingers were not. They had closed around the stem of her fan so tightly that the knuckles showed pale, Eugenia looked at her cousin, then at the empty carriage tray. The page remained missing. Counter 83 remained with him, unless he had already passed it to someone else. Valentine followed her glance. You are still thinking about it? Yes, even now, especially now. Why? Eugenia met his eyes. Because mistakes become less innocent when the person responsible runs away. For a moment the noise of the ballroom seemed to recede. Valentine regarded her with a stillness that no longer felt cold. It felt deliberate. Then perhaps tomorrow we should discover whether he ran. Lady Ursula's head turned sharply. Tomorrow? I intend to call in the morning. He spoke to her, but the words were meant for Eugenia, if that is agreeable. It was not a request society expected a duke to make of a dependent woman. The surprise of it moved through her before she could conceal it. You may call, Your Grace. Then I shall. He bowed first to Lady Ursula, then Philomena. His final bow was to Eugenia. It was no deeper than courtesy required, but he held her gaze through it. When he walked away, the ballroom did not immediately recover. Conversation resumed in fragments. Fans lifted again. Two mothers whispered behind gloved hands. Across the room, the women he had passed watched Eugenia as if she had committed an offense merely by existing where his attention had stopped. Philomena remained silent until Valentine had joined Mr. King near the musicians' gallery. Then she turned to Eugenia with a smile so calm it revealed more than anger would have done. He crossed the entire room to speak to you. Eugenia looked once more toward the carriage doors. He crossed it because of the counter. Did he? Philomena asked. Lady Ursula opened her fan with a single sharp motion. Tomorrow morning, she said, you will remember precisely who you are. Eugenia's fingers found the cracked compass in her pocket. The needle would still point north, whether Lady Ursula approved or not. Beyond the ballroom, an attendant hurried toward the livery entrance in search of a missing page and a brass counter that had never appeared on the official list. By 10 o'clock the next morning, the drawing-room at Rivington House had been arranged to suggest that no disturbance had ever touched the family. Sunlight lay across the pale carpet. A silver coffee service gleamed beside Lady Ursula's elbow. Philomena sat near the window in a morning gown of soft green muslin, her embroidery untouched in her lap. Only Eugenia knew that the household had been searched before breakfast for a page who had not slept in his bed. His name was Thomas Bell. He had entered Lady Ursula's service 11 months earlier, carried notes, fetched parcels, and assisted at crowded entertainments when extra hands were needed. Sometime after midnight, he had collected his wages from the under-butler, claimed that his mother was ill, and left through the servants' entrance with one small bundle. No one had seen him since. Lady Ursula had ordered the matter kept quiet. Eugenia had spent the morning wondering why silence was always demanded most urgently when truth threatened the powerful. You will say nothing unnecessary, Lady Ursula told her for the third time. His Grace is making a social call, not conducting an inquiry. Eugenia stood near the mantel, dressed in brown merino that had been carefully brushed and twice altered. He said he intended to ask about the counter, then answer briefly. Briefly and truthfully are not always the same thing. Philomena lifted her eyes from the embroidery. Must everything become a contest with you? No, only those things in which I am expected to lose before speaking. Lady Ursula set down her cup. You seem to have mistaken one evening of attention for independence. The words struck cleanly because they were chosen for that purpose. Eugenia kept her shoulders level. No, my lady. independence would require wages sufficient to live elsewhere. A servant entered before Lady Ursula could reply. His Grace, the Duke of Kesterbridge. Valentine came into the room with the same controlled presence he had carried through the assembly rooms, though daylight made him seem less remote. His dark coat was cut for a morning call rather than evening display, and he held his hat beneath one arm. He greeted Lady Ursula and Philomena with formal courtesy. When he turned to Eugenia, his gaze paused, as if confirming that she had not been removed from the scene he meant to examine. Miss Tresham, Your Grace. Lady Ursula indicated the chair nearest her. We are honored. I hope last night's small confusion did not disturb your rest. Valentine sat only after the women had done so. Eugenia remained in the chair, slightly behind Philomena, where Lady Ursula had placed her. It did not, he said. Mr. King sent a note to Royal Crescent early this morning. Lady Morland reached home safely. The counter did not reach the livery office. Philomena's needles stopped above the linen. Perhaps the boy dropped it. Perhaps. Valentine looked at Eugenia. Mr. King also learned that the page belonged to this household. Lady Ursula's expression did not change. Thomas Bell assisted because the rooms were crowded. He has since left my service without permission. When? During the night. And the counter? Not found. Valentine's attention returned to Eugenia. You said the mark on its rim seemed familiar. Lady Ursula spoke before Eugenia could answer. Miss Tresham is inclined to connect ordinary things with her father's work. Captain Tresham filled her head with roads, tolls, and distances. Useful knowledge for a soldier, perhaps. Less so for a lady. It was useful to Lady Morland, Valentine said. Eugenia met his eyes. The mark was a crescent filed across the edge. My father used similar marks when copying paired objects into route inventories. One mark showed that two pieces belonged together, even if the stamped numbers became difficult to read. Paired objects, counters, tallies, sometimes keys. She leaned forward despite Lady Ursula's warning glance. The Milsom Street livery uses paired brass counters for hired coaches during crowded assemblies. One half is given to the guest. The matching half remains with the coachman. When the number is called, the caller compares them before allowing the passenger to enter. Philomena frowned. Why would a carriage require such ceremony? Because hired coaches can resemble one another after dark. Because callers mishear names. Because a gentleman may send for a guest without knowing which driver was assigned. A matched pair prevents confusion. Yet Lady Morland's own carriage was private, Valentine said. Yes, which is why she should never have been handed a livery counter at all. The room went still. Lady Ursula's fan opened with a measured flick. That proves only that Thomas was careless. It proves he placed an unnecessary object in Lady Morland's hand, Eugenia said. Whether carelessly or deliberately remains unknown. Valentine considered this. And the number 83, if it came from the Milsom Street livery, there should be a coachman's half in their register or possession. Could the crescent mark identify the pair even if someone altered the number? If the mark crossed both joining edges? Yes. His questions were precise. More importantly, he waited for the answers. Eugenia had known men who asked women questions only to provide themselves with a pause before speaking again. Valentine listened as though her knowledge might alter what he did next. Lady Ursula noticed it too. Your Grace, surely a livery clerk can resolve this, without involving Miss Tresham further. A clerk may tell me what his books contain. Miss Tresham can tell me what to ask. Philomena laid down her embroidery. You cannot mean to visit a stable yard with her. Not alone. Valentine's tone remained mild. Lady Morland is a patroness of the benefit ball planned for later this month. She requires assistance with carriage arrangements, particularly after last night. I called at her house before coming here. Eugenia's pulse shifted. You spoke to Lady Morland. I asked whether she would consider employing someone who understood the danger better than those who dismissed it. Lady Ursula's face hardened by a degree. Eugenia already has duties here. Then Lady Morland may request her time formally. Valentine took a folded paper from inside his coat. He did not offer it to Lady Ursula. He held it toward Eugenia. Her proposed terms. Eugenia crossed the small distance and accepted the paper. The contact between their hands did not occur. He released it before her fingers closed, as though even that minor courtesy should belong to her choice. The arrangement was brief. 3 mornings of consultation. Attendance at the benefit ball, 10 guineas paid directly to Miss Eugenia Tresham. Authority to review carriage lists, token procedures, and calling arrangements under Lady Morland's patronage. Her name appeared twice. Not companion, not cousin, Miss Eugenia Tresham. 10 guineas is excessive, Lady Ursula said. For clerical work. It is the sum Lady Morland proposed, Valentine replied. It is not charity. She expects the work to be done well. Eugenia read the final line again. Payment upon completion to be placed directly in her hand or deposited according to her written instruction. I would require 1 addition, she said. Lady Ursula stared at her. Philomena looked almost amused. Valentine only asked, what addition? That no change to the carriage procedure be made in my name unless I have approved it in writing. If I am to be responsible, I must have authority equal to the responsibility. Something warm and restrained entered his expression. That is reasonable. And I will need access to the livery register. Lady Morland's secretary can request it. Not a copy prepared after the request. The original entry viewed in the clerk's presence. Lady Ursula rose. Eugenia, this is intolerable. Eugenia looked at her. No, my lady. It is employment. The distinction seemed to fill the room. Valentine did not rescue her from the silence. He allowed her words to remain where she had placed them. At last, Lady Ursula sat again. And who will perform your duties here? The same people who perform them whenever I am ill, Eugenia said. Badly, according to you, Philomena murmured. Eugenia turned to Valentine. With those additions, I accept. Lady Morland expected you might. She does not know me. She knows you prevented her from entering an unknown carriage while everyone else watched me enter a ballroom. His voice lowered slightly. That was sufficient evidence of judgment. The compliment was not ornamental. It reached her more deeply because it was tied to action. Before she could answer, hurried footsteps sounded beyond the door. The under-butler entered without his usual composure. He bowed to Lady Ursula, then to Valentine. My lady, Mr. King's man has returned. Thomas Bell was seen at the Bristol Turnpike before dawn. He paid for a place on the westbound coach. Lady Ursula's fingers tightened over her fan. Then he has gone. There is more, my lady. The livery office has sent word. The under-butler swallowed. The coachman's half of counter 83 was never returned. Eugenia felt the folded agreement grow rigid between her hands. Valentine rose slowly. His gaze met hers, and this time, neither of them mistook the vanished page for carelessness. On Monday morning, the 8th of September, the Milsom Street livery yard smelled of damp straw, leather, and the sharp iron tang of recently shod horses. Eugenia stood beneath the covered entrance beside Lady Morland. whose presence made the visit respectable enough for Bath and inconvenient enough for anyone hoping to dismiss it. Valentine waited a short distance away, with the livery proprietor, giving Eugenia room to question the clerk without turning the matter into a ducal command. That restraint did not go unnoticed. 2 days earlier, she would have expected him to take the register, issue instructions, and leave everyone else to arrange themselves around his decision. Instead, he had asked Lady Morland whether Miss Tresham should lead the inquiry. The answer had been immediate. She noticed the danger, let her notice the rest. The clerk brought out a thick account book bound in worn calfskin and placed it upon a high desk. His name was Mr. Peake, a narrow-faced man whose fingers bore permanent black smudges from ink and harness grease. He turned the pages with increasing reluctance. "Number 83, Eugenia said. The paired brass counters. When were they last issued?" Mr. Peake stopped. His eyes moved toward the Duke, then back to the ledger. "6 weeks ago, miss." "To whom?" The name given was Mr. Dale. "A gentleman? A servant speaking for a gentleman?" "Whose servant?" The clerk wet his lips. He wore Rivington livery. Lady Morland's cane struck the stone once. "That is rather more than a careless page." Mr. Peake shifted his weight. "I can only tell you what was entered, my lady." Eugenia leaned closer to the ledger. The line had been written on the 26th of July. 1 black coach, 1 driver, 2 horses, evening hire, paid in cash, no destination recorded. "Why is there no route?" she asked. The man said his master would give the driver instructions later. Was that usual? Not usual, not forbidden. And the counters? Issued with the coach. Returned? Mr. Peake looked down. No. Valentine spoke for the first time. "Neither half?" The clerk shook his head. "Neither, your grace?" Eugenia traced the line without touching the paper. "Was the coach returned?" "The next morning." "By the same driver?" "Yes, without the counters. He claimed he had lost them." "Both?" "That was his claim." Mr. Peake closed the ledger too quickly. Eugenia placed one hand on the cover before he could remove it. "Please open it again." The clerk stared at her hand, then at Valentine. Valentine did not move. "Miss Tresham asked you," he said. The book reopened. Eugenia examined the entries above and below number 83. Most hires listed a destination, a surname, and a return time. The incomplete line stood out like a missing milestone on an otherwise measured road. "Who accepted the coach when it came back?" she asked. "I did." "Did you inspect it?" "The usual glance." "Mud on the wheels?" "Some. Distance?" "I could not say." "You could estimate?" Mr. Peake's face tightened. "East Road, perhaps." The clay was pale. Eugenia looked up. "Not Bristol Road?" "No, miss. I would have expected darker mud." Valentine's attention sharpened. "And the driver?" "Gone now. Left our employ 3 weeks ago." "Name?" "Samuel Crowe." "Where did he go?" "He did not say." The answer settled uneasily among them. Lady Morland moved to a nearby bench, clearly displeased by the smell, but more displeased by the secrecy. Eugenia studied the ledger again. The counters had a crescent file mark. Mr. Peake nodded. "I marked the pair myself after one edge was dented. It helped the caller match them in poor light." "Across the joining edges?" "Yes. Then even if the numbers were filed away, the pair could still be identified. If both halves remained, they remained somewhere." The clerk looked unconvinced. "Brass can be melted." "It can," Eugenia said, "but someone who intended to destroy them would not have used one at the assembly rooms." Silence followed. Valentine's gaze met hers. He had reached the same conclusion. Counter 83 had not survived by accident. Someone had preserved at least the guest half long enough to place it in Lady Morland's hand. Outside the covered entrance, a groom led a grey gelding across the yard. The animal shied at a loose chain, and the sudden sound drew Lady Morland's attention. "I have endured enough stable air for one morning," she announced. "Mr. Peake, you will allow Miss Tresham to examine this book again if she requires it." "Yes, my lady." "And you will not alter a line." The clerk looked faintly offended. "I would never." "Then the instruction should cost you nothing." Lady Morland rose and moved toward her carriage with her maid. Eugenia remained by the desk long enough to note the date, the cash payment, the description of the Rivington servant, and Samuel Crow's name. When she turned, Valentine was waiting near the doorway. "You knew where to look," he said. "The incomplete entry was more useful than the complete ones. Your father taught you that. He taught me that a route becomes dangerous where the record stops." They stepped into the pale morning light. Lady Morland's carriage stood ready. But the older lady had ordered her maid to accompany her separately to a nearby apothecary. That left Eugenia, properly chaperoned by Lady Morland herself, for the short drive toward Queen Square, with Valentine riding beside the carriage on horseback. Before Eugenia climbed in, the Duke noticed the brass compass chain at her waist. "Is that the one you carried at the Assembly Rooms?" "Yes." She drew it from the concealed pocket of her pelisse. The case was small and darkened with age. A crack crossed the lid from hinge to rim. "It belonged to my father." Valentine did not reach for it. "May I?" Eugenia placed it in his open palm. He examined the compass without pressing the damaged lid. The needle trembled, then settled. "It still works. My father said a thing need not be unbroken to remain trustworthy." Valentine's thumb rested near the crack, never over it. He was a surveyor, a military surveyor. After the wars, he copied route books for officers, posting houses and contractors. Distances, gradients, toll gates, river crossings. I assisted him when his eyesight weakened. "You learned the roads of England at a writing desk." "A road is still a road when drawn in ink." He returned the compass directly to her hand. "My brother died on one." The confession came without warning. Eugenia closed her fingers around the case. Valentine looked toward the horses rather than at her. His carriage overturned in rain. The driver chose a narrow descent to save time. I had argued for the northern road. I was not with him. The last sentence held the weight of years. "You could not have known the driver would change the route." "No, but I learned what happens when details are left to chance. And since then, I approve my drivers. I review the roads. I decide departure times." "For yourself." His gaze returned to her. "For anyone under my protection." Eugenia heard the care beneath the control. She also heard the cage forming around it. "Safety can become another word for obedience, Your Grace." His expression stilled. "You think me controlling?" "I think fear often dresses itself as responsibility." Lady Morland, already seated inside the carriage, pretended not to listen and failed completely. Valentine did not take offense. "And what would you have me do?" "Ask whether the person wishes to be protected. Then listen when the answer is not the one you expected." Something in his face shifted, not surrender, but recognition. Eugenia entered the carriage as Lady Morland's driver turned toward Queen Square. The route carried them briefly past the lower edge of Walcott. Eugenia looked through the window just as a black hired coach emerged from a narrow yard ahead. Painted leather covers had been strapped across both doors. One corner lifted in the wind. Beneath it, for a single instant, she saw a livery number concealed by false arms. "Stop the carriage," she said. But the black coach had already turned into the traffic and disappeared. The black coach vanished into Walcott traffic before Lady Morland's driver could turn. Eugenia leaned toward the window, searching between carts, sedan chairs, and a brewer's wagon that blocked half the street. She saw only a dark roof passing beyond a row of shop fronts. Then nothing. "What did you see?" Lady Morland asked. "Leather covers over both carriage doors." Eugenia kept her gaze on the bend, painted with arms. Whose? Valentine had brought his horse alongside the carriage and heard the answer through the open window. Eugenia looked up at him. "I believe they were yours." He drew his mount closer. Northcote arms, a black shield, silver chevron, and the stag above it. But the motto was wrong. Lady Morland frowned. Wrong in what way? The spacing. The second word sat too far from the first. Whoever painted it copied the design without understanding how it is normally arranged. Valentine's expression hardened, and beneath the leather, a hired livery number. I saw only the edge. Could it have been 83? I could not see enough to say. He turned his horse toward the Walcott road. Eugenia's hand tightened around the compass inside her glove. "Your Grace." He looked back. "You cannot seize a carriage because I glimpsed one corner of a painted cover. I can ask who owns it. Ask, yes." The distinction held between them. Valentine considered her for a moment, then inclined his head. "Ask." Lady Morland gave Eugenia a satisfied glance. "He can be taught." "My lady," Valentine said, though the rebuke lacked heat. "I am merely observing progress." He directed Lady Morland's driver to return Eugenia and her patroness to Queen Square, then rode toward Walcott with one groom. Before leaving, he met Eugenia's eyes. "I will send word when I know more." "Send facts," she said, "not conclusions." Something almost like a smile touched his mouth. "Facts, then." The coachyard lay behind a cooper's shop and a narrow row of stables darkened by years of smoke. By the time Valentine arrived, the black carriage was gone. A yard clerk stood beneath the eaves, twisting his cap between both hands, while the proprietor, Mr. Bale, insisted that no coach bearing ducal arms had ever been housed there. "I did not say the arms were painted on the doors," Valentine said. "I said they were strapped over them." Mr. Bale's eyes shifted toward the secondary gate. "Then I cannot help you, Your Grace. A black coach left this yard less than 15 minutes ago. Many black coaches pass through Walcott. This one carried false Northcote arms. I saw no such thing." Valentine looked toward the mud. Fresh wheel tracks crossed the yard and curved through the rear opening. One wheel had cut more deeply than the other, leaving an uneven rut. The pattern was distinct, but not proof enough to justify taking possession of private property. Eugenia had been right. He disliked that the fact relieved him as much as it irritated him. "Who hired the rear shed?" he asked. Mr. Bale stiffened. "It is used for overflow." "By whom?" "Different gentlemen." "Name the most recent." "I cannot betray customers." Valentine's groom took one quiet step forward. The clerk paled. Valentine lifted a hand, stopping any further pressure. "You may keep your discretion," he said. "You will also keep the coach if it returns." Mr. Bale swallowed. "I cannot promise that." "Then promise this. You will send word to Kesterbridge House if a black carriage arrives with leather covers over its doors. And if it does not, then you will have lost nothing." Valentine turned to leave. The clerk spoke before he reached the gate. The covers were not proper coach panels. Mr. Bale spun toward him. "Hold your tongue." The young man looked at Valentine with the desperate courage of someone who had already said too much. "They were painted leather, Your Grace, buckled from inside. One corner would not lie flat. Did you see the arms? Only part. A stag. Who ordered the coach moved? The clerk glanced at his employer. A gentleman's servant brought instructions. Whose servant? Silence returned. Valentine let it stand. Fear could not be forced into truth without becoming another form of control. Send the name to my house when you decide which consequence you prefer, he said. The anger of the man who hired the coach or responsibility for what he intends to do with it. He rode away without looking back. That evening, behind the closed doors of a private sitting room at Rivington House, Dudley Rivington stood beside the fireplace while Lady Ursula read a note twice. Philomena sat opposite them, still wearing the pale blue gown chosen for a small supper in Laura Place. No one had touched the tea. The Duke went to Walcot, Lady Ursula said. Dudley poured brandy into a glass. He found nothing. He found enough to ask questions. Questions are not proof. Questions become proof when answered by frightened tradesmen. Philomena's hands tightened in her lap, then dismissed the plan. Dudley looked at her. You were eager enough when you believed the carriage would carry you. That was before Eugenia saw the token, which is why Eugenia must be discredited before she explains what she saw. Philomena rose. Discredited is not the same as harmed. No one intends to harm her. You intend to place her in a carriage after midnight with a man society expects her to want. With the Duke, Lady Ursula corrected. A distinction any sensible woman would value. Philomena turned toward her mother. Eugenia is not sensible in the way you mean. Then she will suffer for it. The cruelty of the sentence entered the room without raised voices. Lady Ursula folded Mr. Bale's message and placed it beside her cup. The coach has been moved to the secondary shed near the old toll road. The driver has been paid another 5 guineas. He will follow instructions. Dudley drank. Good. And the page? Philomena asked. Thomas Bell is already beyond Bath, Dudley said. He believes silence will protect him. Will it? Dudley's smile held no comfort. If he remains silent. Philomena crossed to the window. Queen Square lay quiet under the first lamps of evening. Eugenia gave the counter back to him. Yes, Lady Ursula said, which means she cannot prove she ever held it. She remembered the file mark. Memory is not evidence, especially from a dependent woman who has just attracted the attention of a duke. Philomena looked over her shoulder. And if he believes her? Lady Ursula's gaze hardened. Then we will make belief costly. Dudley set down his glass. The leather arms must be corrected before the next use. Northcote's motto spacing was noticed. By Eugenia, Philomena said. By the woman you keep calling insignificant. For the first time, Dudley's confidence thinned. She has good eyes. She has always had good eyes. Then we will give society something more interesting to look at. Lady Ursula rose and moved to the writing desk. The Lansdowne Crescent Ball is in 3 nights. A crowded departure. Confused servants. 2 messages delivered at once. Philomena went still. You have chosen the night already. The opportunity chose itself. And if Eugenia refuses to enter the coach, she will be told I have fainted inside it. Lady Ursula dipped her pen into ink. She may resist ambition, but she has never resisted duty. Philomena looked away. Somewhere below, the front door opened and closed. The ordinary sound seemed suddenly ominous. Dudley crossed toward the bell pull. The coach must remain hidden until Friday. I will send a man to make certain. In Queen Square, 1 street away, Eugenia stood beside the small desk in her chamber and copied everything she remembered from the black coach, the curled corner of leather, the glimpse of a livery number, the false Northcote arms, the uneven spacing of the motto. She did not know that the carriage had already been moved. She did not know that its driver had been paid to remain silent. She only knew that the same household which had dismissed counter 83 as a mistake had grown watchful whenever she named it. Her compass rested beside the page, its cracked lid open. The needle held north. A knock sounded at her door. A servant delivered a note from Kesterbridge House in Valentine's hand. No carriage recovered. Painted leather covers confirmed by one clerk. Rear gate used. Further inquiry pending. Fax, as promised. Beneath the final line, he had added, "I do not believe no. 83 was an accident." Eugenia read the sentence twice. The next morning, while assisting Lady Morland with the benefit ball list, she and Valentine met again near the Milsom Street entrance. Rain had left the paving slick. As Eugenia stepped down from Lady Morland's carriage, one wheel shifted into a rut and the body lurched. Valentine moved toward her, then stopped before touching her. He held out his arm. "May I?" The question was quiet enough that only she heard it. Eugenia looked at the offered support, then at his face. She placed her gloved hand upon his sleeve. His arm steadied beneath hers without tightening. The contact lasted only until both her feet were secure on the stones. Still, something within her changed. He had not assumed fear gave him permission. "Thank you," she said. "You are welcome." He released her at once. Behind them, Lady Morland ordered her driver to avoid the rut on the return journey. Eugenia almost smiled. Then Valentine's gaze moved toward Walcott, where the black coach had disappeared. "Whoever kept those counters has been waiting 6 weeks to use them," he said. Eugenia felt the truth of it settle coldly. Then we should ask what they have been waiting for. 3 days later, Lady Ursula informed her that attendance at the Lansdowne Crescent Ball was not optional. By 11:30 on Friday night, the lamps along Lansdowne Crescent burned pale against the mist, and the line of carriages had begun to creep toward the private ball one by one. Eugenia stepped down beneath Lady Ursula's eye and felt the familiar weight of the cracked compass hidden inside her reticule. Philomena followed in silver gauze, all softness and composure, while Dudley remained close enough to appear attentive without seeming watchful. The house blazed with candles. Music drifted through the upper rooms. Servants moved between doors with trays, messages, and cloaks. Nothing looked unusual. That troubled Eugenia more than obvious disorder would have done. Lady Ursula had repeated her command twice during the drive. Eugenia was not to leave Philomena's side. She was not to speak of counter 83. She was not to approach the Duke unless addressed first. Eugenia had answered only the last instruction. "I don't approach men who prefer issuing orders to asking questions." Lady Ursula had not replied. Yet the moment they entered the ballroom, Eugenia saw Valentine, near the far windows, speaking with Lady Morland and the Master of Ceremonies. He noticed her almost at once. His gaze moved over her face, then to Philomena, then to Dudley. He did not cross the room. He had learned something from her warning, and the knowledge warmed her. Despite the unease gathering beneath her ribs, she remained beside Philomena through the first dance, the second, and the long interval in which Lady Ursula displayed her daughter to 3 eligible gentlemen and 1 widowed marquess. Valentine did not seek Eugenia out. He only watched when no one else seemed to notice. That restraint became its own kind of conversation. Near midnight, Lady Morland left the card room early, complaining of fatigue. Eugenia saw her patroness's maid fasten a dark cloak around the older woman's shoulders before escorting her toward the main stairs. Valentine was still in the ballroom. He had just declined a dance with a baronet's daughter and was speaking to the hostess. Eugenia noted both facts without knowing why they felt important. Then a Rivington servant appeared at her elbow. It was not Thomas Bell. This man was older, with greying hair and the impassive face of someone trained to carry unpleasant news without emotion. "Miss Tresham, Lady Rivington has taken ill," he said. "She is waiting in the carriage and asks for you at once." Eugenia turned. Lady Ursula had been beside the card tables less than 5 minutes earlier. "What happened?" "A faintness, miss." She would not allow a scene. Philomena pressed one hand to her throat. "Mama has been tired all evening." Her concern was credible, too credible. Eugenia looked toward the card-room doors. Dudley stood there, speaking to an acquaintance as though he had heard nothing. "Which carriage?" she asked. The servant held out a brass counter. Number 83 gleamed in his palm. The crescent-shaped file mark cut the rim. Eugenia's breath slowed. "This is not Lady Rivington's carriage token. The family coach could not be brought forward, miss. Lord Rivington hired another." Philomena took Eugenia's arm. "Please, Mama asked for you." The pressure was slight, but urgency made it difficult to refuse without appearing cruel. Eugenia accepted the guest, half of counter 83. It was colder than she remembered. "Come with me," she said to Philomena. "I can't. Lord Wexford has just claimed this dance, and Mama would be furious if I caused comment. Your mother is, supposedly, ill. And she asked for you, not me." The answer settled the matter more clearly than any confession. Eugenia slipped the counter into her reticule beside the compass. "Then I will go." She had taken only 3 steps toward the doors when another servant crossed the ballroom toward Valentine. The man bowed and spoke near his shoulder. Valentine's expression changed. He glanced toward the staircase, then directly at Eugenia. She stopped. He excused himself and moved through the crowd. "Miss Tresham." His voice remained formal. "I have been told Lady Morland has become ill in a carriage and requires assistance." Eugenia looked toward the upper landing, where she had seen Lady Morland leave with her maid. By whom? A servant in Rivington colours. Valentine's gaze dropped to the reticule in her hand. "You have received a message as well. Lady Ursula is said to be waiting in a hired coach." "Which number?" Eugenia drew out the brass half and opened her palm. 83. The stillness between them was absolute. Valentine did not touch the counter. "Lady Morland left with her maid," Eugenia said, "and Lady Ursula was not faint when I last saw her. Then someone intends us to reach the same carriage by different instructions." "Yes," he looked toward the servants' passage. "We can alert the host. Not yet. If the people behind this see us withdraw, the coach will disappear again." "You propose entering it?" "I propose learning whether the matching half appears." Valentine's jaw tightened. "That is not a risk I can approve." "You are not being asked to approve it." The words were quiet. His eyes met hers. She saw the old fear rise in him, the need to stop the danger by taking command before anything could go wrong. For one moment, she expected him to summon servants, seize the doors, and bury the trap beneath his authority. Instead, he asked, "What do you need?" Relief moved through her so sharply it almost felt like pain. "Stay close. Do not let them separate us once we reach the carriage. And if I say the road is wrong, believe me before the driver." "I will." They descended by different stairways to avoid drawing attention. Eugenia reached the portico first. Mist curled along the crescent. A black coach waited beyond the lamps, its door already open. Painted leather covers concealed both panels. Even in the poor light, she saw the false Northcote arms and the wrong spacing beneath them. The coachman leaned down. Number 83. He held up the matching half. The crescent mark crossed its edge. Proof. Eugenia stepped forward. Valentine emerged from the opposite side of the portico at the same instant, as though he had also been summoned from within. Neither spoke until they were inside. The door slammed. The lock dropped from outside. The coach lurched away before Valentine reached the handle. "It is bolted," he said. Eugenia pulled the compass from her reticule and opened the cracked lid. The needle trembled. The coach descended briefly, turned, then climbed. She felt the gradient through the wheels. "We should be going south toward Queen Square," she said. "We are not." Valentine pulled the check string. Once, twice. The driver did not slow. Outside, the streets thinned. The wheels struck rougher ground. Eugenia held the compass near the window, waiting for the needle to settle after each turn. "East," she said, toward Bathampton. Valentine struck the roof with the silver head of his cane. "Stop this carriage." No answer came. His hand moved toward the window latch, but Eugenia caught his sleeve. "Do not jump. The road is descending." He looked at her fingers on his arm, then at her face. What lies ahead? A toll bar. The coach must slow. The trust in his next action mattered more than any declaration could have done. He sat back and waited. The carriage rattled onward. Eugenia counted the turns from memory. One shallow bend, a steeper drop, a stretch of level road. Then the wheels began to slow. A lantern appeared through the mist. Valentine lowered the window and called before the driver could shout over him. "Watchman, hold the bar. This carriage is being driven against our orders." The toll-keeper stepped into the road. The gate remained closed. The horses checked. Voices rose outside. Valentine forced the door latch upward as the coach stopped, and this time the bolt shifted under pressure from the watchman's hand. He stepped down first, then turned toward Eugenia without reaching for her. "May I?" She placed her hand in his. Before she could descend, 3 figures emerged from the shadow beside the toll house. 2 gentlemen and a woman wrapped in a traveling cloak. Prepared witnesses. Their faces registered shock with suspicious readiness. Eugenia understood at once what they were meant to see. A duke's apparent carriage. Midnight. An unmarried woman stepping down from within it. Valentine understood too. His hand closed more firmly around hers, not possessively, but with the steadiness of shared knowledge. He did not let go until a legitimate hired carriage arrived from Bath. Inside its quiet shelter, the danger passed, and the consequences began. Eugenia still held the guest half of number 83 in her reticule. Valentine sat opposite her, his face controlled and pale. After several moments, he opened his hand between them. He did not speak. Eugenia placed her fingers in his. They remained that way until the lamps of central Bath appeared through the mist. By then, the story had already travelled ahead of them. By 10 o'clock on Saturday morning, the pump room had already decided what had happened on the Bathampton road. No one asked Eugenia for the truth. They had chosen a more satisfying version before she crossed the threshold. In that version, a poor companion had pretended indifference until the Duke of Kesterbridge pursued her. She had lured him from a private ball after midnight. She had entered his carriage willingly. She had arranged to be seen stepping down beside him, where witnesses could carry the tale back to Bath before dawn. The false Northcote arms had become proof of Valentine's involvement rather than proof of fraud. The locked door had disappeared from the story entirely. Eugenia felt the whispers move ahead of her as Lady Ursula led the Rivington party beneath the high windows. Her right shoulder ached from the violent lurch inside the black coach. But she kept her posture straight. The guest half of Counter 83 remained inside her reticule beside her father's compass. She had not surrendered either object. Not yet. Lady Ursula had insisted they appear publicly. Absence would look like guilt, she had said at breakfast. Eugenia understood now that presence could be arranged to look like guilt as well. Philomena walked at her mother's side with pale eyes and perfect sorrow. Dudley followed, grave and protective, playing the role of a brother humiliated by another woman's ambition. Guests turned as they passed. Some stared openly. Others looked away with exaggerated delicacy. The cruelty of respectable people rarely announced itself as cruelty. It called itself concern. "There she is," someone murmured near the fountain, after refusing even to look at him. That was the cleverest part. Eugenia stopped. Lady Ursula continued 2 steps before realizing she had lost control of the procession. "Walk," she said without turning. "No." The single word brought Philomena around. "Eugenia," she whispered, "don't make this worse. I am not the one who has made it." Dudley approached with a measured expression. "Then perhaps you will explain why you entered a carriage bearing the Duke's arms." "Because your servant told me Lady Ursula had fainted inside it." Lady Ursula's brows lifted. "My servant? He wore your livery. Anyone can wear a coat." "That is an interesting defense from the family whose page first placed Counter 83 in Lady Morland's hand." Several nearby conversations ceased. Dudley lowered his voice. "You are distressed. We should discuss this at home." "You mean where no one can hear my answer. I mean where you will not destroy what remains of your reputation." Eugenia met his gaze. "You speak as though you own it." "At present, our family is the only reason you have one." The sentence was soft. It was meant to bruise without producing a scene. Before Eugenia could reply, the crowd shifted near the entrance. Valentine had arrived. He wore a dark morning coat and no expression society could easily read. Yet Eugenia saw the strain in the set of his jaw. He had not slept either. His gaze found her first. Then it moved to the faces turned toward her, to Lady Ursula's calculated sorrow, and to Dudley's position at Eugenia's shoulder. He crossed the room. Not quickly, not dramatically. Every step carried the certainty of rank, and the whispers fell silent as he approached. "Miss Tresham," he said, "Your Grace." For one dangerous moment, relief moved through her. She resisted it. Relief could become dependence if accepted too quickly. Lady Ursula dipped into a curtsy. "Your Grace, I hope you understand that House Rivington is deeply wounded by what occurred. We had no knowledge of Eugenia's arrangement." "There was no arrangement," Valentine said. Philomena's lashes trembled. "Then why were you both in the same carriage?" "Because 2 false messages sent us there." "From whom?" Dudley asked. "That remains to be proven." The answer was honest. It was also weak against a room hungry for certainty. Lady Ursula seized it. "Then the only established fact is that Eugenia left the ball with you after midnight. The established facts include a false carriage, counterfeit arms, a door bolted from outside, and witnesses placed at the east toll before our arrival." "Your word will always outweigh hers," Lady Ursula said sadly. "That is the tragedy of her position." Eugenia heard the trap close. If Valentine defended her, Ursula would call it ducal partiality. If he hesitated, society would call it doubt. He looked at Eugenia. Fear moved behind his restraint, not fear of scandal, but fear of losing control of the outcome. She recognized it from the livery yard. She had warned him that responsibility could become obedience demanded from others. She saw the precise instant he chose the wrong answer. Valentine turned to the room. Then there will be no question of Miss Tresham's position. Eugenia's breath tightened. Your Grace, he continued before she could stop him, I intend to marry Miss Eugenia Tresham. Silence struck the pump room harder than any shout. Philomena went white. Lady Ursula's expression froze between triumph and outrage. Dudley stared as though the floor had shifted beneath him. Around them, the scandal changed shape in an instant. A compromised dependent became a future duchess. A trap became a courtship. A woman's ruined reputation became a duke's decision. Valentine looked at Eugenia, and for one heartbeat he seemed to believe he had saved her. She had never felt more trapped. No, she said. The word carried farther than she expected. Valentine went still. Eugenia. It was the first time he had used her given name. Under different circumstances, it might have touched her. Now it felt like another decision made without permission. You have not proposed to me, she said. I have not accepted you. There is no engagement. A ripple moved through the room. Valentine lowered his voice. This will end the speculation. By replacing one false story with another, it will protect you from a scandal created by people who assumed I could be moved wherever they wished. She drew the brass counter from her reticule and closed her fingers around it. You have just done the same things. Pain crossed his face. He mastered it quickly, but not before she saw. That was not my intention. No, your intention was good. That does not make your choice mine. Lady Ursula stepped forward. Do you understand what you are refusing? Eugenia turned to her. Perfectly. No respectable house will receive you after this. Then I will learn which houses value truth more than convenience. Dudley's voice hardened. You have nowhere to go. Mrs. Cy has offered me a room near Sydney Gardens if I ever required one. Lady Ursula stared. You arranged this. Months ago. A woman in my position learns to know where the exits are. Eugenia looked back at Valentine. He had not moved. The whole room waited for him to command, persuade, or reclaim the situation. Tell me one thing, she said. Did you announce marriage because you want me, or because you want an ending you can control? His silence was brief, but it was enough. He could not answer without confronting the truth she had placed before him. Eugenia slipped the counter back into her reticule. Then there is no engagement. Valentine's hand lifted slightly, then stopped before reaching for her. I will not prevent you from leaving. Thank you. That is not enough. His voice was low. No, she said. It is only the first correct thing you have done this morning. She left the pump room beneath the gaze of Bath society. No one applauded. No one defended her, yet each step belonged to her. By noon, Eugenia had returned to Rivington House, packed 2 modest trunks, collected the wages Lady Ursula still owed her, and refused the family carriage. Mrs. Cy sent a respectable hired coach with her maid as escort. Eugenia carried her compass, the guest half of number 83, her clothing, and the papers connected to Lady Morland's employment. Nothing else in the house belonged to her. Lady Ursula watched from the drawing-room doorway. You will regret this. Eugenia placed one gloved hand on the coach door. Perhaps, but the regret will be mine. She entered without looking back. From the pavement, Valentine watched the hired coach depart towards Sydney Gardens. He did not follow. He did not send a groom behind it. For the first time since his brother's death, he allowed someone he cared for to choose a road he had not approved. The restraint cost him more than society would ever know. The next morning, he went to Mrs. Cy's house without a ring, without a marriage contract, and without any certainty that Eugenia would receive him. Mrs. Sigh received the Duke of Kesterbridge at 11 o'clock on Sunday morning, with the grave composure of a woman who had spent 60 years learning that rank did not excuse poor manners. Her drawing-room overlooked a narrow stretch of garden near Sydney Gardens, where rain had darkened the leaves and left the gravel shining. Eugenia sat beside the window with the guest half of counter 83 inside her reticule, and her father's compass in the pocket of her morning gown. Her right shoulder still ached when she moved too quickly, though the soreness had lessened since the carriage trap. Valentine entered without a ring, solicitor, secretary, or prepared document. He carried only his hat, and the expression of a man who understood that nothing he possessed guaranteed him a welcome. Mrs. Sigh remained in the room after the introductions. She took up her knitting, settled into a chair near the hearth, and made it clear that privacy would not be purchased at the expense of propriety. Valentine accepted the arrangement without objection. "Thank you for receiving me," he said. Eugenia kept her hands folded. "Mrs. Sigh received you. I agreed not to leave." Mrs. Sigh's needles clicked once. "An important distinction, Your Grace." "Yes," Valentine said. "It is." He did not sit until Eugenia indicated the chair opposite her. Even then, he remained near its edge, as though comfort would be presumptuous. "I came to apologize." Eugenia waited. He looked directly at her. "Yesterday, I treated your reputation as a difficulty that my title could solve. I decided what your future should be before asking what you wanted. I used marriage as a shield, but I did not ask whether you wished to stand behind it." His voice did not soften to invite pity. "You warned me that protection could become another form of command. I heard you. Then, when I was frightened, I did precisely what you warned me against." Mrs. Say's knitting slowed. Eugenia felt the truth of his words, but truth alone did not undo the pump room. "You also made your announcement before the people who were judging me," she said. "Yes." "You allowed them to believe my answer belonged to you." "Yes." "And when I asked whether you wanted me or merely an ending you could control, you could not answer." Pain moved through his face, restrained but visible. "Because I did not know whether fear had spoken before affection. I know now that I cared more about stopping the damage than about asking what the cost of my solution would be to you. That is not the same as knowing what you feel. No, I will not claim certainty merely because certainty would be convenient." Eugenia had expected excuses. She had prepared herself against tenderness disguised as explanation, against his brother's death, offered as a reason she should forgive him quickly. He gave her neither. "What do you expect from me?" she asked. "Nothing. Everyone expects something. Then I expect you to decide whether I may assist with the inquiry under conditions you set. I do not expect forgiveness, engagement, gratitude, or permission to speak for you." The answer reached the part of her that still remembered his open hand in the hired carriage. She did not trust that memory enough to let it rule her. "There will be conditions. Name them. No announcement of any kind concerning me. No attempt to remove me from Bath. No private payment to the Rivingtons in exchange for silence. No settlement of the matter through your influence if the evidence can be heard openly." Valentine nodded after each point. "Agreed. You will not take possession of evidence without my consent." "Agreed. You will not decide which witnesses are too dangerous for me to question." His jaw tightened, but he said, "Agreed. And if I choose to leave Bath, you will not prevent me. If I choose to remain, You will not turn my presence into an act of obedience to you. Agreed. Mrs. Sigh lowered her knitting. You answer quickly, Your Grace. Valentine looked at Eugenia, because I had the whole night to understand that the right to refuse me must remain real even when I dislike the refusal. Silence settled. It did not feel empty. Eugenia opened her reticule and removed the brass guest half. Counter 83 lay on her palm, its crescent mark visible near the edge. Valentine did not reach for it. This is the object they used to bring me to the false coach, she said. I have kept it since Friday night. It should be secured. Yes, by someone whose custody can be witnessed. Mrs. Sigh rang the bell. A maid admitted Mr. Hargood, a Bath solicitor whom Mrs. Sigh had known for years and whom Eugenia had asked to arrive at 11:30. Valentine looked surprised, then almost approving. Eugenia did not need his approval, but she was glad he recognized that she had acted before he came. Mr. Hargood placed a clean sheet of paper on the writing desk and recorded the date, time, object, and persons present. Eugenia laid the counter upon the paper. He described the number, the worn brass, and the crescent-shaped file mark. He then placed it in a folded envelope, applied red wax, and pressed his plain professional seal into it. Eugenia, Mrs. Sigh, and Valentine each signed across the outer fold. The envelope will remain in my locked document case, Mr. Hargood said. It will not be opened except before witnesses or upon a magistrate's request. Eugenia watched him place it inside the case. The counter no longer belonged to the uncertainty of her reticule. Its movement had been seen, named, and recorded. There is another matter, Mr. Hargood continued. I visited the Milsom Street livery office this morning. Mr. Peake allowed me to inspect the original register in his presence. He unfolded a witnessed extract. The hire of coach number 83 was paid in cash on the 26th of July. The intermediary was not named in the ledger, but Mr. Peake and a groom both recognized him as a Rivington footman called Samuel Pritchard. Valentine's expression sharpened. Is Pritchard still employed at Rivington's house? He was yesterday. This morning he claimed illness and did not report for duty. Eugenia thought of Thomas Bell fleeing before dawn, and the coachman disappearing after the trap. They remove each person once he has served his purpose, or frighten him into removing himself, Mrs. Sigh said. Mr. Hargood folded the extract. The original register remains at the livery office. This copy is signed by Mr. Peake and witnessed by me. It proves the Rivington connection to the hire, though not yet the purpose. It proves enough for questions, Valentine said. Eugenia looked at him. Questions I will decide when to ask. He inclined his head. Yes, by Tuesday Lady Ursula had begun her answer. 2 households withdrew offers of paid assistance for the benefit ball. A third sent a note saying that Miss Tresham's presence would be unsuitable while questions remained about the East Road incident. One lady, who had praised Eugenia's courage at the assembly rooms, now claimed she could not remember speaking to her. The story changed again. Eugenia had stolen the brass counter from the livery office. She had invented the false coach. She had persuaded the Duke to support her accusation after he regretted his public proposal. Every version placed ambition where fear and evidence should have been. Mrs. Sigh read the final note aloud, then dropped it onto the breakfast tray. Lady Ursula means to starve you out of Bath without appearing to touch you. Eugenia looked through the window toward the wet garden. Leaving would be easy. London was distant enough to let gossip thin. A smaller town might offer anonymous work, yet departure would allow Lady Ursula to call flight, a confession, and the coach, the missing pair of counters, and the false arms would remain available for another woman. Valentine's apology had returned choice to her. She would not use that choice to disappear. "Please send word to Lady Morland," Eugenia said. "Tell her I will complete the carriage arrangements whether society approves of me or not." Mrs. Sy studied her, and after the benefit ball, Eugenia touched the empty space in her reticule where counter 83 had rested. "After the truth is known, I will decide where I go." That afternoon, Mr. Hargood received a message from the Bathampton toll watchman. The man remembered one further detail about the false coach. Its left rear wheel had been missing a single iron rivet. He had seen the same uneven wheel 3 days earlier at the Walcott yard. On Wednesday morning, the 17th of September, Eugenia returned to Walcott with Mr. Hargood and Lady Morland, while Valentine followed in a separate carriage at the distance she had requested. The arrangement had been her own. His presence ensured that no tradesman could intimidate them, but his position behind their coach made it impossible for anyone to claim that the Duke had led the inquiry or supplied her conclusions. By the time they entered the yard, the rain had stopped. Damp earth packed the ruts between the sheds, and a pale strip of sunlight caught on the iron rims of 2 standing carriages. The black coach was not among them. Mr. Bale came out of his office with the expression of a man who had spent several days regretting silence. "I told His Grace there was no such vehicle here," he said. "You told him you could not help," Eugenia replied. "Those are not precisely the same words." Lady Morland tapped her cane against the ground. "Do not waste her time with distinctions too cowardly to be useful." Mr. Bale's face coloured. Mr. Hargood opened a notebook. "We are here to ask about the coach seen leaving this yard on the 8th of September and later used on the Bathampton road. You may answer voluntarily before witnesses, or answer later when a magistrate requests the same information." Mr. Bale looked past them. Valentine's carriage had stopped outside the gate. The Duke remained within it. Eugenia had asked him not to enter unless called. He was keeping his word. "The coach has been moved," Mr. Bale said. "When?" Eugenia asked. "The morning after the incident." "By whom?" "The same intermediary who arranged its storage." "Name him." "He never gave one." "Then describe him." Mr. Bale hesitated. Tall, dark coat, spoke like a gentleman, though he dressed as a servant. Lady Morland's eyes narrowed. "You accepted money from a man whose name you did not know?" "Cash does not require an introduction, my lady." "Neither does ruin," she said. Eugenia moved toward the rear gate where the false coach had passed. The wet ground preserved several older impressions beneath newer cart tracks. Near the shed wall, one set of wheel ruts curved sharply. The left rear track was uneven. At regular intervals, a small break appeared in the pressed mud where the rim should have left an unbroken line. "Mr. Hargood," she called. He joined her. Eugenia pointed without stepping into the track. The missing rivet. Mr. Bale came closer. "Many wheels lose rivets. Not many leave the same interruption at the same distance along the rim," she said. The toll watchman described one missing from the left rear wheel. This track was made before the latest rain. It curves from the secondary shed to the rear gate. Mr. Hargood measured the spacing with a length of string and recorded it. "Was the coach stored in that shed?" he asked. Mr. Bale looked toward the office. "For a time." "Who owned it?" Eugenia asked. "I did." "Then you hired it on the 26th of July, through Milsom Street?" "Yes." "And afterward, you stored it here with false armorial covers attached?" "Not attached when it first arrived." "Who supplied them?" Mr. Bale rubbed both hands over his face. Lord Rivington's man. Which man? I cannot say. The first arrangement came to him through a footman. Later, Lord Rivington himself spoke to me. The admission hung in the damp air. Mr. Hargood's pencil stopped. Lady Morland straightened. You are certain? Yes, my lady. What did he ask? Eugenia said. A private shed. No questions. A driver willing to follow instructions after midnight. Did he name the intended passengers? No. Did he explain the false Northcote arms? He said they were for a masquerade. Lady Morland gave a sound of disgust. A masquerade on a public road. Mr. Bale looked down. I knew it was irregular. I did not know it was meant to trap anyone. You knew enough to hide the coach when questions began, Eugenia said. His shoulders sagged. Lord Rivington sent word that the Duke intended to seize it. I was told to move it to a farm shed beyond Betheston. Is it there now? No. It was taken again before dawn on Sunday. By the driver? I believe so. Samuel Crowe, yes. Mr. Hargood closed his notebook for a moment. Where is he? Gone. When were you last in contact? Saturday night. He came for the coach and demanded the remainder of his payment. I told him Lord Rivington had not sent it. Crowe said he would keep something worth more than the debt. Eugenia's thoughts went to the missing coachman half of counter 83. Did he say what? No, only that he had proof enough to make a gentleman pay. The missing driver was no longer merely a loose end. He was carrying evidence and knew its value. Eugenia looked toward Valentine's carriage. He had not moved. He had not entered the yard even after hearing Dudley's name. The restraint mattered because it cost him something. Mr. Hargood resumed writing. You will sign a statement before we leave. Mr. Bale gave a defeated nod. As Eugenia crossed toward Lady Morland's coach, Valentine stepped down from his own carriage but stopped outside the gate. May I approach? He asked. She inclined her head. He came no nearer than necessary. You heard? Enough. Dudley hired the coach through an intermediary. Crowe took it and vanished when the final payment failed, and may possess the matching half. Most likely. Valentine's gaze rested on her face. You were right to come without me leading. That was not the easiest choice for you. No. He did not pretend otherwise, but it was yours. The words warmed her more than praise would have done. Mrs. Sy received another warning this morning, Eugenia said. A hostess threatened to remove her from a subscription list if I remain in her house. His expression hardened. I can stop that. With my consent, you may support Mrs. Sy publicly as a woman of unimpeachable character. You may not turn her home into a ducal outpost. Agreed. And you may not call upon every hostess who repeats Lady Ursula's gossip. That condition is less agreeable. It remains a condition. A trace of rueful humor entered his eyes. Then I shall dislike it obediently. Eugenia almost smiled. That would be progress. 2 mornings later, Philomena Rivington arrived at Mrs. Sy's house wearing grey silk and an expression composed for sympathy. Mrs. Sy received her in the front drawing-room and remained beside the hearth while Eugenia sat opposite her cousin. Philomena did not mention Mr. Bale or the Walcott yard. She began with regret. Mamma is very troubled by how far this has gone. Lady Ursula has worked diligently to make certain it travels farther. She is frightened for the family. Fear does not become virtue merely because it belongs to a family. Philomena's fingers tightened around her reticule. You cannot remain in Bath without employment or invitations. People have made up their minds. People can change their minds when facts become inconvenient. And if the facts never appear, Eugenia studied her. Is that what you expect? Philomena looked away first. I came to offer help. She placed a folded bank draft on the table. £200, enough to live quietly elsewhere. London, perhaps, or Cheltenham. You need only leave before the benefit ball. Mrs. Say's knitting ceased. Eugenia did not touch the draft. In exchange for what? Nothing. Money offered for nothing is usually payment for silence. You are determined to think the worst of us. Then tell me who placed the witnesses at the East Toll. Philomena's face altered. Only slightly, but enough. I don't know what you mean. They were waiting before our carriage arrived. 2 gentlemen and a woman, prepared to see me step down beside the Duke, who told them where to stand. You cannot prove they were prepared. I did not ask whether I could prove it. I asked who sent them. Philomena rose too quickly. You always believed yourself cleverer than everyone around you. No, I learned that those around me depended upon my pretending not to see. Take the money, Eugenia. No, you will regret forcing this into public view. Perhaps, but not as much as you fear it. Philomena's composure cracked for one breath. You have no idea what was supposed to happen. The words escaped before she could stop them. Eugenia went still. Supposed to happen to whom? Philomena seized the bank draft and folded it with unsteady fingers. I have nothing more to say. She left without waiting for Mrs. Say's servant. The front door closed sharply behind her. Eugenia remained seated, listening to the silence she had left. Then the final shape of the plan emerged. The false ducal coach, the hired witnesses, the paired counters, the midnight road. They had not built such an elaborate machine merely to destroy a poor companion. Eugenia had become the target only after she noticed the first mistake. And Valentine crossed the ballroom toward her. Before that, another woman had been meant to step down from the Duke's apparent carriage. Philomena had not feared the scandal. She had expected it to make her Duchess. Samuel Crowe arrived at the Green Man shortly after noon on Saturday, the 20th of September, wearing a weather-stained coat and the wary expression of a man who expected every door to close behind him. The public house stood beyond the busiest part of Bath, respectable enough for a solicitors' meeting, and plain enough not to attract society's notice. Mr. Hargood had reserved a private parlour at the rear. Mrs. Say sat near the window with Eugenia, while Valentine remained on the opposite side of the table. No one blocked the door. Crowe noticed that first. He also noticed the Duke. I was told there'd be a solicitor, he said. No one mentioned his grace. You may leave, Eugenia replied, but if you remain, you will speak before witnesses, and no one here will take anything from you without your agreement. Crowe studied her. You are the lady from the coach. Yes, you kept your head. So did you until you refused to stop. Shame crossed his face, though defensiveness followed quickly. I was paid to drive. I wasn't paid to hurt anyone. You were paid to ignore the check string, Valentine said. His voice remained controlled, but the room tightened around it. Crowe glanced toward the door. Eugenia spoke before fear could send him through it. His Grace will not question you unless I ask him to. Valentine's gaze moved to her, then back to Crowe. That is correct. Crowe lowered himself into the nearest chair. Lord Rivington hired the coach, he said, not through the livery office at first. His footman made the arrangement, but his lordship came to Walcott later. He wanted a black coach, quiet horses, and a driver who didn't ask why false arms were being strapped over the doors. Mr. Hargood opened his notebook. Did Lord Rivington identify the arms? Northcote. He brought the painted leather himself. Valentine's hand closed once against the arm of his chair, then relaxed. What instructions did he give you? Eugenia asked. To answer to number 83 at the Lansdowne ball. I was to wait until 2 passengers entered from opposite sides. One servant would bring a lady. Another would bring the Duke. Once both were inside, I was to bolt the doors, take the East Road, and stop near the Bathampton toll after midnight. Why there? 3 people would be waiting to see them step down. Mrs. Say's mouth hardened. Witnesses chosen in advance. Paid witnesses, Crow said. They were told only that a gentleman and an unmarried lady would arrive together in a ducal carriage. Eugenia kept her hands still in her lap. Who was the lady meant to be? Crow looked toward the floor. At first, Miss Rivington. Valentine went very still. Crow continued quickly. That was the original arrangement. Her mother said a public mistake could become a private understanding. And a private understanding could become marriage. But after the assembly rooms, the instructions changed. After I noticed the guest counter, Eugenia said. After the Duke crossed the ballroom to you, Crow replied. Lord Rivington said Miss Rivington could no longer be risked. You had seen too much, and if society believed you had trapped his grace, no one would listen when you spoke about the coach. The cruelty of the design lay in its neatness. Eugenia had not merely replaced Philomena as the passenger. She had become the explanation for the crime. Who carried the messages at Lansdowne? Mr. Hargood asked. Rivington's servants. One was told to say Lady Ursula had fainted. The other was told to say Lady Morland was ill. Did they know the whole plan? I doubt it. Each man knew only his sentence and the carriage number. And Thomas Bell? Eugenia asked. He swapped the first counter at the assembly rooms. He was paid to see whether anyone noticed. When you did, they sent him away. Where is he now? I don't know. Crow reached inside his coat. Valentine shifted, but he did not rise. Crow drew out a small leather pouch and placed it on the table without releasing it. From within, he removed a brass half-counter. Number 83 was stamped near the edge. A crescent-shaped file mark crossed the joining rim. Eugenia's breath caught. The guest half remained sealed in Mr. Hargood's locked case. This was its mate. Why did you keep it? She asked. Lord Rivington owed me 10 guineas. After the toll incident, he refused the balance and told me to disappear. I kept the counter because it proved I drove the coach he hired. And the coach itself, hidden in a barn beyond Batherston. I moved it before Mr. Bale could hand it over. The leather arms are still strapped to the doors. Mr. Hargood looked at the brass half. Will you surrender that into my custody? Crow closed his fingers around it. Not yet. Valentine's expression hardened again, but Eugenia spoke first. Why not? Because once I give it away, I'm only a driver with a story. With this, I'm a man Lord Rivington still has reason to fear. He already has reason to silence you, Mrs. Say said. Crow's face tightened. Then I'll keep the only protection I have. Eugenia understood the fear. She also understood the risk. Show it to Mr. Hargood long enough for him to record the marks. You may retain possession until a public comparison. Crow looked at her sharply. Public? Yes. You intend to expose them before society? I intend to show society the machine it helped mistake for truth, Mr. Hargood recorded the number, crescent mark, wear pattern, and Crow's continued possession. Crow then returned the coachman, half to the leather pouch, and placed it inside his coat. His signed statement took another half-hour. Every page was read aloud before he marked it. He confirmed Dudley's payment, the false Northcote covers, the East Road route, the prepared witnesses, the changed female passenger, and the unpaid balance. When the document was complete, Mrs. Say ordered food brought in. Crow ate as if he had not trusted a table in several days. "There is another benefit ball at the Assembly Rooms on Wednesday," Eugenia said. "Lady Ursula means to restore Philomena's standing there." Crow stopped chewing. "Lord Rivington told me the family would be present. Can you bring the false coach to the carriage court?" "I can, with the leather arms attached." "Yes, and answer when number 83 is called." He looked from her to Valentine. "If I do, I'll have no hiding place afterward." Valentine spoke carefully. "You will have a magistrate's clerk present, a solicitor's written record, and my word that no servant of House Rivington will remove you before you are heard." Crow gave a bitter laugh. "A duke's word is powerful until another gentleman says the duke arranged the whole display." Eugenia leaned forward. "Then the call will not come from His Grace. It will come from the Master of Ceremonies. The guest half will be produced from Mr. Hargood's sealed envelope. You will present the coachman half yourself. The livery owner will identify the hidden number beneath the false arms. No single person will control all the proof." Crow's gaze steadied on her. "You've thought this through." "I have had several days in which society thought for me. I prefer my own method." After Crow left by the rear door, Valentine remained standing beside the cold fireplace. "We should seize the coach now," he said, with a magistrate's authority before Dudley learns Crow has spoken. "And then what?" Eugenia asked. "We present it safely, privately, legally. Those are not the same thing." His jaw tightened. "You are proposing to bring the instrument of your humiliation back before the same crowd that condemned you. Yes, Dudley may alter the plan. He may move the coach. He may threaten Crow. Which is why Mr. Hargood will place the statement with the magistrate's clerk before Wednesday. But if you seize the coach under ducal authority, Lady Ursula will say you manufactured evidence to vindicate the woman you tried to marry. I am trying to protect you." The old sentence entered the room. Valentine heard it as soon as he spoke. Eugenia watched recognition and frustration struggle within him. "Then, protect my right to be believed without becoming the source of every fact," she said. "The coach must arrive under its own driver. The matching counter must appear in Crow's hand. The false arms must be removed before witnesses. I will not step inside it. I will stand beneath the portico and direct the order. And if something changes, you will be nearby." "How nearby?" "Inside the ballroom until I give the second signal." He stared at her. Waiting was the one task his fear made almost unbearable. "You ask me to remain inside while you face the carriage court. I ask you to trust my judgment as I trusted yours when you stopped us at the toll. You told me where the road led, and now I am telling you where this one must lead." Silence held them. Then Valentine exhaled slowly. "The Master of Ceremonies must agree. Mr. Hargood will speak to him. A magistrate's clerk must be present before the coach arrives." "Yes, Mrs. Cy stays with you beneath the portico." "Yes, and you do not enter that carriage under any circumstance." "I had no intention of doing so." His gaze remained on hers. "Then I will follow your plan." Eugenia felt the weight of the words. He had not merely yielded. He had placed power behind her decision without taking it from her. "There will be one signal when the coach enters," she said. "You will wait. The second signals will come only after Crow presents his half, and Mr. Hargood opens the sealed envelope." Valentine's voice was quiet. "I will not move until you give it. On Monday afternoon, the 22nd of September, Mrs. Sire's drawing room held more secrets than any ballroom in Bath. The curtains were open to the grey light. The door to the hall remained unlatched, and every person present had been invited for a purpose. Mr. Hargood stood beside the writing desk, with his locked document case at his feet. Mr. King, the master of ceremonies, reviewed the benefit ball carriage list with visible displeasure. A quiet young man named Mr. Avery, clerk to the local magistrate, sat near the hearth and copied each agreed step into a small notebook. Samuel Crow remained closest to the door, one hand inside his coat where the coachman half of counter 83 rested in its leather pouch. Mrs. Sy occupied her usual chair. Eugenia stood before them with a plan she had written in her father's old root hand, each movement marked in order, so no one would act from panic. Valentine stood across the room and said nothing. That silence was part of the plan. The false coach is to enter the assembly room's carriage court at 11:45, Eugenia said. Mr. Crow will answer only when Mr. King calls number 83. Mr. King frowned at the page. The regular callers will know nothing. They will know that one number is to be held until your instruction, Mr. Hargood replied. Nothing more. And the crowd? Mrs. Say asked. Most guests will still be in the ballroom, Eugenia said. Enough will be moving toward departure to witness the coach arrive. We need observers, not a crush. Mr. Avery dipped his pen. The magistrate has authorized my presence to record the comparison and any voluntary statements. I have no authority to arrest a peer. Nor should you pretend otherwise, Valentine said. Lord Rivington may be required to appear before the magistrate afterward. Nothing more will be claimed tomorrow night. His tone was level, yet Eugenia saw the effort beneath it. He wanted Dudley removed before the plan began. He wanted guards at every entrance and the coach surrounded before its wheels stopped. Instead, he stood where she had asked and allowed lawful limits to remain lawful. Mr. Hargood touched the locked case with the toe of his shoe. The sealed guest half will stay with me until Crow produces the coachman half. Mrs. Sy and Mr. Avery will witness the seal before I break it. Crow shifted uneasily. I keep mine until the comparison is made. Yes, Eugenia said. You will present it in your own hand. And the coach? You will remain on the box until Mr. King asks you to step down. The doors will stay open. I will not enter it. Valentine's eyes moved to her at once, though she had already promised this. Where will you stand? Mr. King asked. Beneath the portico with Mrs. Sy and Mr. Hargood. Mr. Avery will stand inside the carriage court, where he can see both halves and the coach doors. And His Grace? Mr. King looked toward Valentine. Eugenia answered. Inside the ballroom. The room became still. Crow glanced from her to the Duke. Mrs. Say's knitting needles paused. Valentine did not object, but one muscle tightened along his jaw. Eugenia continued before anyone could soften the requirement for him. There will be 2 signals. When the coach enters, I will lower my white glove from my right hand. That only confirms the vehicle has arrived. His Grace will remain inside. Mr. Avery wrote the detail down. The second signal, after Mr. Crow presents the coachman half, after Mr. Hargood opens the sealed envelope, and after both halves are visible together, I will raise the same glove above shoulder height. Only then will His Grace come to the carriage court. Mr. King looked doubtful. If Lord Rivington interferes before the second signal, Mrs. Say and I withdraw through the side passage. Mr. Avery remains with Mr. Hargood. Mr. Crow takes the coach no farther than the outer gate. And His Grace still waits? Mr. King asked. Valentine answered this time, until Miss Tresham gives the signal. Eugenia looked at him. The words were correct. His face told another truth. Waiting frightened him more than confrontation. Mr. King closed the carriage list. Then I will arrange the call, No one else receives the number in advance. Mr. Avery sanded his notes. Crow repeated his route from the Batherston barn to Bennett Street, and agreed to arrive by the lower approach so the false Northcote arms would be visible beneath the lamps. Mr. Hargood confirmed that Mr. Peake and Mr. Bale would be present to identify the livery number and leather covers. Each man left separately to avoid notice. By 4 o'clock, only Mrs. Cy, Eugenia, and Valentine remained. Mrs. Cy gathered her knitting and moved to the adjoining morning room, leaving the connecting door open. "You have 10 minutes," she said, "and I shall hear if either of you becomes foolish." Valentine waited until her footsteps stopped. "You chose a signal that requires me to watch the ballroom doors." "Yes." "From inside." "Yes." He crossed to the window but did not look out. "When my brother's carriage failed to arrive, I waited in a drawing room very much like this one." Eugenia said nothing. He had spoken of the death before, but not of the waiting. His hands rested against the sill. The rain had begun before dusk. I knew the road he meant to take. I knew the descent was narrow. I sent a groom, then another. Everyone told me not to imagine disaster before there was evidence. His voice remained controlled, though each word seemed drawn from a place he had kept closed. By the time the messenger came, there was nothing left for me to decide. Since then, when danger appears, waiting feels like cowardice. Eugenia moved nearer, stopping several feet away. "Tomorrow night, waiting will be an action. It will feel like abandonment." "To you," he turned. "Yes." She did not soften the truth. "But if you come before the second signal, you will take the scene from me. The crowd will see a duke arrive, order men about, and produce evidence through his solicitor. Lady Ursula will call it devotion. Dudley will call it fabrication. I will become the woman behind your rank again." "I know. Knowing is not the same as enduring it." "No." He looked toward the open door to the morning room, then back at her. "What if the coach arrives and Crow changes his mind? Then I withdraw. What if Dudley reaches you first? Mr. Avery and Mr. Hargood will be there. They are not armed. Neither is Dudley if the assembly room's rules are observed." Valentine's mouth tightened. "Rules do not prevent harm merely because they exist. Nor does your presence prevent every harm." The words struck him, but he did not retreat from them. Eugenia stepped closer. "I am not asking you to be indifferent. I am asking you to trust my judgment while every instinct in you demands control. And if your judgment places you in danger, then you may act when I signal or when I clearly cannot signal, not before." He held her gaze for a long moment. "You leave me one exception. I am not cruel. No, that is why this is difficult." The admission touched her more deeply than charm could have done. He opened his right hand between them, palm upward. He did not ask. He simply waited. Eugenia looked at that hand and remembered the hired carriage after Bathampton, when he had offered reassurance without claiming her future. She remembered the pump room, when fear had made him speak for her. Both men existed in him. The one he became would be decided by what he did next. She placed her hand in his fingers closed gently, then stopped, allowing her to choose whether the contact continued. She did not withdraw. They stood in silence while the clock on Mrs. Cy's mantel marked 1 minute, then another. The warmth of his hand steadied her without confining her. His thumb moved once across the edge of her glove, so lightly that the gesture felt more like a question than a caress. "I am afraid," he said. "So am I. You do not look it, neither do you." A faint, sorrowful smile crossed his face. "Eugenia, may I hold you?" The request remained between them. Free of urgency, she could have refused. he would have accepted it. That certainty gave her courage. Eugenia released his hand only to step closer. She placed both arms around him before he could move, making the embrace her answer. Valentine drew her against him with careful strength. He did not press his face to hers or turn tenderness into demand. One hand rested between her shoulder blades. The other remained at her waist, steady and still. Eugenia felt his breath change. For a few moments, the Duke of Kesterbridge was not a title, a shield, or the man who had tried to decide her road. He was simply Valentine, frightened of waiting and willing to do it because she had asked. She held him a little longer than propriety allowed, and a little less long than her heart desired. When she stepped back, he released her at once. "Tomorrow," she said, "you wait for the second signal. I will. Even when the coach enters, even then. Even if society begins whispering before the proof is shown." His gaze remained steady. "I will wait until you call me." On Tuesday evening, the final messages went out. Mr. King confirmed the carriage number. Mr. Avery confirmed the magistrate's authority. Mr. Hargood checked the unbroken seal on the guest half. Crow sent word that the false coach and its leather Northcote arms were ready. At midnight on Wednesday, the carriage caller at the Bath Assembly Rooms lifted his voice above the gathering crowd. Number 83, the call of number 83, carried beyond the portico and into the ballroom with the clean authority of an ordinary departure. For one suspended moment, nothing happened. Then the sound of wheels rose from Bennett Street. Eugenia stood beneath the lamps beside Mrs. Sy and Mr. Hargood, her white glove still fastened over her right hand. Mr. Avery waited near the center of the carriage court with his notebook open. Mr. King stood beside the caller, outwardly composed. Guests had begun drifting toward the doors. Drawn by curiosity they did not yet understand, Lady Ursula, Philomena, and Dudley remained inside the ballroom, close enough to hear the number and far enough to believe it meaningless. The black coach turned through the gate. Its lamps were lit, the painted leather covers strained against the doors, displaying the Northcote arms to every watching eye. One corner curled away from the wood, exactly as Eugenia remembered. Road grime darkened the straps. The left rear wheel rolled unevenly, and at each revolution, the missing rivet left a faint break in the iron's reflection. Crow sat rigid on the box. He brought the horses to a halt beneath the portico and held up a brass half-counter. "Number 83, he called. A murmur spread through the gathering guests. Eugenia removed her white glove and lowered it at her side. The first signal. Through the open ballroom doors, she could see Valentine standing motionless near the musicians' gallery. His gaze found hers, then moved to the false coach. Every instinct in him urged movement. He remained where she had asked him to remain. Mr. King stepped forward, present the counter. Crow climbed down and placed the brass half upon a small table Mr. Hargood had prepared. Mr. Avery moved close enough to observe without touching it. "Coachman half, number 83, Mr. Hargood said. "Crescent-shaped file mark across the joining edge. Worn lower rim. Holder retains possession until comparison." Crow kept 2 fingers against the brass. Mr. Hargood lifted his locked document case onto the table. Mrs. Sy and Mr. Avery examined the wax seal on the envelope inside. "Unbroken," Mrs. Sy said. Mr. Avery nodded. "Unbroken and signed across the fold by Miss Tresham, Mrs. Sy, His Grace, and Mr. Hargood." The crowd pressed nearer. Lady Ursula appeared in the doorway, with Dudley and Philomena behind her. The colour left Philomena's face when she saw the coach. Dudley stepped forward, but Mr. King raised one hand. "The carriage court is under my order this evening, Lord Rivington. That vehicle is a fraud," Dudley said. "That is precisely what we are examining," Eugenia replied. Mr. Hargood broke the seal. He opened the envelope and withdrew the guest. Half Eugenia had surrendered in Mrs. Say's drawing-room. He placed it beside Crow's half, without joining them. The numbers matched. So did the wear along the lower rims. Most damning of all, the crescent-shaped file mark crossed the two joining edges as one continuous curve when Mr. Hargood brought them together. A woman near Lady Ursula gasped. Mr. Avery recorded the comparison. Mr. Hargood separated the halves again. Crow reclaimed the coachman half, while the guest half remained on the solicitor's paper. Eugenia raised the white glove above her shoulder. The second signal, Valentine crossed the ballroom threshold at once. He did not seize Dudley, order the coach surrounded, or speak before Eugenia. He came to stand several paces behind her, and waited. That choice was visible to everyone who had once watched him decide her future in the pump room. Mr. King addressed the crowd. "Counter number 83 is not recorded to House Northcote. It was not issued to His Grace, his household, or any private carriage belonging to him. The number was absent from my official list on the 5th of September, and was called tonight only under my direct instruction." Mr. Peake came forward from the side entrance, pale but steady. "The pair belongs to the Milsom Street livery system. I marked the joining edge myself after the brass was dented. Both halves vanished following a cash hire on the 26th of July. Mr. Bales stood beside the false coach. At Mr. Hargood's request, he unbuckled the leather cover from the nearest door. The painted Northcote arms sagged in his hands. Beneath them appeared the original hired livery number, along with pale strap marks where the false panel had rubbed against the black paint. Another attendant removed the second cover. The wrong motto spacing, once a glimpse in poor light, now faced the room in full view. "The coach was mine," Mr. Bale said. "Lord Rivington arranged its private storage through an intermediary. He later spoke to me himself." Dudley's face tightened. "You are lying to protect your business." "My business is already ruined," Mr. Bale answered. "I have no reason left to protect your name." Crow stepped forward. "Lord Rivington paid me to drive it. He supplied the leather covers. He ordered me to answer number 83 at the Lansdowne Ball, collect 2 passengers brought by separate messengers, bolt the doors, and take the East Road. I was told to stop where witnesses had been placed." Dudley laughed without humor. "A driver demanding unpaid wages invents a convenient tale." "Then perhaps the page invented his as well, Mr. Hargood said. A young man emerged from behind Mr. Avery. Thomas Bell looked thinner than he had at the assembly rooms, and his eyes never settled on Lady Ursula for long. "I returned from Bristol yesterday," he said. "Mr. Hargood's clerk found my mother. She told me silence wouldn't make me safe." Philomena took one step backward. Thomas faced Mr. Avery. "Miss Rivington gave me the guest half of number 83 before the Assembly Rooms ball. She paid me to place it in Lady Morland's hand instead of the proper marker. I was to see whether anyone noticed. When Miss Tresham did, Miss Rivington told me to leave Bath before morning." "That's false," Philomena said. Thomas swallowed. "You gave me 5 guineas in the blue morning room. Lord Rivington gave me another 5 at the servant's door." Dudley moved toward him. Valentine shifted only 1 pace, enough to place himself between Dudley and the page without touching either man. "You will not intimidate a witness," he said. The words were quiet. Dudley stopped. Eugenia looked at Crow. "You said Lord Rivington, ordered you to stop where witnesses waited. Did he identify the place? Before Crow could answer, Philomena's voice broke through the court. You can't prove anyone ordered him to stop at the east toll. Silence fell with brutal completeness. Crow had not named the toll. Neither had Eugenia. Mr. Hargood turned slowly toward Philomena. How did you know the stopping place was the east toll, Miss Rivington? Philomena's lips parted, but no answer came. Lady Ursula closed her eyes. Dudley said, Mother, say nothing. You have said enough for all of us, Lady Ursula replied. When she opened her eyes, the calculation in them had given way to exhaustion. The original plan was mine. Philomena stared at her. Lady Ursula continued. Philomena was to be seen leaving a carriage bearing the Duke's arms. The witnesses would speak. Society would insist upon marriage before His Grace could untangle the deception. It was crude, but desperation makes refinement seem like a luxury. And Eugenia? Mrs. Sy asked. Lady Ursula looked at her former dependent. She noticed the counter. Then His Grace crossed the ballroom for her. Dudley said we could use both problems at once. If Eugenia appeared to have trapped him, no one would believe her accusations. Philomena would be spared the risk, and the Duke's attention would be forced into scandal. Public horror turned upon House Rivington with the same speed that public suspicion had once turned upon Eugenia. Several patrons stepped away from Ursula. One gentleman quietly told Dudley that his name would be removed from a club supper list. Another informed Philomena that his mother would not receive her. Mr. Avery closed his notebook. Lord Rivington, the magistrate requires your attendance tomorrow morning for examination. You will remain under the observation of 2 appointed officers until then. Dudley looked to Valentine. You cannot order this. I did not, Valentine said. That is why it will stand. When the immediate statements were complete, Mr. King directed the crowd back from the carriage court. Mr. Hargood resealed the guest half and accepted the coachman half from Crow, placing both with the written statements for the magistrate. Valentine stepped forward only after Eugenia nodded. He faced the assembled guests. Miss Tresham was wronged by House Rivington. She was also wronged by me. The room held still. In the pump room, I announced an intention to marry her without asking for her consent. I believed my title could protect her, and in doing so, I repeated the logic of the trap. I chose a destination and expected her to enter the carriage. Miss Tresham owes me no marriage, no gratitude, no forgiveness, and no explanation. He turned to her. Whatever she chooses now belongs entirely to her. Eugenia felt the public weight shift at last, not because a duke claimed her, but because he released every claim society expected him to make. Later, in a small anteroom with Mrs. Sy seated near the open door, Valentine stood before Eugenia without witnesses crowding his words. I will not ask because the scandal is ended, he said. I will ask because I know what I feel and because your refusal would still be yours. He took one breath. I love you, Eugenia. You are the first person who made me understand that safety without freedom is only another locked carriage. Her eyes burned, but her voice remained steady. I love you, Valentine, and now I know you will wait while I choose. Hope moved across his face with such naked restraint that it touched every guarded place within her. Will you marry me? Yes. He did not reach for her. May I kiss you? Eugenia stepped toward him and placed one hand against his cheek. You may. His kiss was careful at first, then warm with all the feeling he had refused to use as pressure. She answered freely, drawing closer until no fear remained between the question and her choice. When they parted, His forehead rested lightly against hers. Beyond the anteroom, the false carriage stood open beneath the lamps, its stolen arms removed, its doors no longer able to carry anyone where she had not chosen to go. On Monday, the 10th of November, the morning light over Bath was pale and clear, and the city seemed quieter than Eugenia had ever known it. 2 days had passed since she and Valentine had stood before the altar of a Bath parish church and spoken vows that no scandal, bargain, or social expectation had forced from either of them. The banns had been properly called. The settlement had been read, revised, and signed only after Eugenia had questioned every clause. It guaranteed her pin money, protected the property and papers that had belonged to Captain Tresham, and preserved her right to manage any earnings from the route copying work she chose to continue. Valentine had accepted each condition without treating agreement as a favor. When Mr. Hargood had asked whether the Duke wished to reconsider a provision allowing his future wife to receive payment directly, Valentine had looked at Eugenia and replied, "Why should I reconsider what belongs to her?" She had loved him before that moment. She had trusted him before it. Yet hearing him defend her independence in a quiet solicitor's office, where no audience waited to admire him, had shown her what their marriage might become in ordinary life. Now, at the entrance of Kesterbridge House on Royal Crescent, trunks were secured to a travelling carriage bound for Westcliff Park. The vehicle bore the true Northcote arms painted directly upon its doors. No false leather covered them. No hidden number waited beneath. The doors stood open, while servants checked straps, blankets, and provisions in full daylight. Valentine had ordered nothing hurried. The horses had been rested, the postilions properly briefed, and an overnight stop reserved, so that neither animals nor servants would be driven beyond reasonable endurance. Even so, he had not chosen the route. That decision waited on the small writing table inside the entrance hall, where 2 itineraries lay beside an unfolded map. Eugenia descended the staircase in a travelling gown of deep green wool, one gloved hand resting lightly on the banister. She was now Her Grace, the Duchess of Kesterbridge, a title that caused servants to bow and strangers to stare. Yet the name had not erased Miss Eugenia Tresham. She still noticed the driver checking the near wheel twice. She still saw that one strap on the luggage rail had been threaded incorrectly. She still paused to thank the maid who had remembered to pack Captain Tresham's route notes separately from her clothing. Rank had changed where she stood. It had not changed where she looked. Valentine waited near the table in a dark travelling coat. He had dismissed the footman to give her space with the maps, though the front doors remained open and the bustle of departure continued around them. "Both routes are ready," he said. "The direct road is faster. The western route through Marlborough adds distance, but gives us a better posting stop." Eugenia removed her gloves and examined the first sheet. "You have left the departure hour unchanged for either road." "Yes." "And the inn at Marlborough has rooms reserved even if we decide against it." "Yes." She glanced at him. "You planned for my choice without predicting it." "I am attempting to become less unbearable." His solemnity lasted only until she smiled. "You have made progress. That is not the same as success." "No. Success must be repeatedly demonstrated." He inclined his head. "A demanding standard. You married a demanding woman. I married a woman who knows the difference between a destination and a command." The tenderness in his voice was quiet, almost private, despite the open hall. Eugenia turned back to the map before the warmth in her face could betray, how deeply the words touched her. The weeks since the assembly rooms had not erased what happened, they had given it consequence. Dudley Rivington had appeared before the magistrate, and faced further proceedings for fraud, bribery, and conspiracy. His title remained, but the protections that had made him careless were falling away. Gentlemen, who once extended credit because of his name, now demanded payment. Clubs that had tolerated his debts declined his company. Mr. Bale had surrendered the false armorial covers and livery accounts. Mr. Peake had preserved the original register. The paired halves of counter 83 remained in official custody, with the statements that explained how they had been used. Lady Ursula and Philomena had left Bath within a week of the exposure. No public farewell marked their departure. Invitations ceased. Doors that had once opened for House Rivington remained closed. Philomena sent Eugenia one letter blaming desperation, society, Dudley, and finally Valentine. Eugenia read it once and answered only that choice remained choice, even when fear made cruelty convenient. Lady Ursula wrote nothing. Thomas Bell had received a recommendation for mercy after giving a complete statement. Mr. Hargood secured him legitimate work at a respectable posting house where his wages were recorded, and no noble family could quietly remove him. Samuel Crow's testimony placed him under suspicion as well as protection, but his cooperation and surrendered evidence prevented Dudley from casting him as the sole author of the scheme. None of these outcomes felt like triumph. They felt like the proper weight of action returning to those who had chosen it. Eugenia traced the slower route with one finger, Bath to Chippenham, then eastward through Marlborough, before turning toward Andover and Westcliff Park. It would require an additional change of horses and a night's rest, but the gradients were kinder and the road better maintained after recent rain. The western route, she said. Valentine did not ask whether she was certain. Then Marlborough. The direct road would save several hours. The horses do not know that society admires haste, nor do the servants. Eugenia looked toward the entrance, where a young footman was trying to conceal relief at the thought of an overnight stop. We will take the slower road. Valentine folded the unused itinerary. It is decided. There was no resistance in him, no hidden disappointment, no pause suggesting that her choice would be accepted. Only if it matched what he had already preferred. The simplicity of that acceptance moved her more than any grand declaration in a ballroom. She reached into the pocket of her traveling gown and drew out the cracked brass compass. The lid still bore the fracture that ran from hinge to rim. Valentine had offered to have it repaired after the wedding, then stopped himself before completing the suggestion. Eugenia had understood the effort. You may say it, she told him now. Say what? That a craftsman could mend the hinge. He came to stand beside her. A craftsman could mend the hinge. And you think I should allow it? I think you should decide whether the crack is damage or history. She opened the lid. The needle trembled over the map, uncertain only for a moment. My father would have liked you, she said. Valentine's expression softened. Even after the pump room, especially after the pump room, he looked surprised. Why? Because he trusted corrected measurements more than confident mistakes. You were wrong, then you corrected the course. With considerable assistance. Good navigation often requires it. Outside, the driver called that all was ready. Valentine offered his hand, but did not close the distance between them. Eugenia looked at his open palm, remembering the black coach, the toll bar mist, and the hand he had offered when neither of them knew what waited in Bath. She remembered the drawing room where he had confessed that waiting felt like abandonment. She remembered him standing inside the ballroom while the false coach arrived, holding still Els until she raised the second signal. This time, she did not merely place her hand in his. She threaded her fingers through his and held them firmly. "Come," she said, "we have a road to choose every day. Then I hope you will continue telling me when I take the wrong one. I promise nothing so gentle. I shall tell you before you reach it." He laughed, and the sound followed them into the morning. They entered the carriage together. No servant closed the door until Eugenia nodded. Inside, the map rested across her knees, and the compass lay open upon it as the horses began to move. Royal Crescent passed beyond the window. Bath unfolded below them in pale stone and autumn light. Valentine lifted her joined hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Are you happy?" he asked. Eugenia considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Happiness was not the absence of memory. It was not applause, vindication, or the protection of a title. It was the freedom to remain herself beside someone who did not require her to become smaller. "Yes," she said, "I am." She leaned toward him and kissed him with the quiet confidence of a wife who had chosen both the man and the road. When she drew back, his forehead rested against hers for one tender moment. Then Eugenia turned to the map. The compass needle settled north. Beyond the glass, the road opened toward Hampshire. Broad enough for uncertainty and bright enough for hope, Valentine waited without speaking. Eugenia studied the two branching lines, placed her finger upon the slower one, and smiled. This way,